Welcome to the Grey Eye and Disability Arts online podcast, Disability and, bringing together thoughtful discussion and debate. This month, Colin Hambrook, editor of Disability Arts Online, chats with climate activist and artist Mike Faulkner about neurodiversity. This podcast contains strong language.
Hello and welcome to the Disability and podcast. My name's Colin Hambrook and I have the pleasure to have interviewed Mike Faulkner. Mike started out as a graphic designer and in the early 1990s formed Defuse, an audiovisual collective who were seen as early pioneers of the VJ scene. His work has been shown internationally, including Pre-Ars Electronica in Linz, Mori Arts Centre in Tokyo, and the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. He was invited as a visual artist to collaborate for a world tour with the musician Beck, and has also performed with Scanner, Steve Reich and the LSO. In recent years, much of Diffuse's practice has focused on environmental issues, creating a series of films for Live Earth, still used by Al Gore today. Through his residency at iBeam in New York, he created Small Global, an interactive video installation about global interdependence, consumption, and its environmental costs. In the podcast, Mike talks about his education, work years, and becoming an artist, addressing how he came to embrace his lived experience of dyslexia and ADHD.
I think it's important to go back to the beginning and almost see where I was. Like at school, I was either really good at subjects or really bad. I was in the top class, and then I'd be demoted by reading aloud. I can't read very well aloud, especially, and I was dropped to the bottom class. I remember my mother saying, "I just don't get it. You're top of your class, and now you're the bottom. What's happened?" I don't think I had any trust in the system. I don't think I worked in that system. I don't think I functioned in that system. So I built, my own opportunities. And looking back now, some things are actually really good, happened in my life which are really good. But at the time, I just saw them as a sort of natural progression. Like, my parents were divorced when I was young. And I know my mother really wanted me to go to college. One of the reasons was she wanted maintenance from my father. So it was like I was going to college full stop. And really my choices were woodwork or art, So I remember going, and I didn't really care about it, to be honest, because I just knew I had no choice. And it's not like I didn't want to go. Yeah, so I went to college. I did an A-level foundation. Yeah, I remember I got a D at college for my course, and I thought that was really bad. And I went to the college, and no one, only two other people got an E or something, and the rest had failed. So it transformed from me being like thinking I got a terrible grade to actually being the only person. I don't think D's great, but it's better than nothing. So it was one of those scenarios, and then I started this stupid course which they decided to cancel within about 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and I just thought, well, that's a waste of time. And I sort of left that course, partly because my mum knew somebody who worked in the studio which did the Argus catalogue, and I went to work there, and they gave me so many skills. Actually, there was photography, there was artwork, and there was just every single skill in terms of graphic design I learned. And they sent me to college 1 day a week. And I was, so, that was a great education. And I know I was really keen to go to college because my sister was at university, and I just thought, I want to go and I want to escape from my small town.
Mike then went on to talk about his early work experiences in England and the US, and how travel opened up the world with new perceptions.
oh yeah, sort of juggling around a bit. I just remember applying for different jobs. I remember I remember applying to do the design packaging at Loctite, a glue factory, the glue company. And I just remember thinking, this must be the most boring job in the world, and it's like I'm actually trying to get this job. I probably didn't come across as a very good candidate in hindsight, but it's like, I think sometimes I look back and I see my daughter and I see opportunities and see the things, and it's different now, but there's still that bleakness ahead of them in a way where they're just underpaid, undervalued. Then I mean, I probably had more opportunities than probably my daughter has in a way, but it's hard at that time of life, isn't it, to know what your life is. You're always constantly told this is what you're going to do and this is how you're going to live your life and get a pension and do that and do this. I mean, I did the total opposite. I just basically went and worked on a summer camp. A friend of mine who'd been at university had gone on to a summer camp and told me, how brilliant it was. Like, you just hang out just do sport, hang out in the mountains, you just have a hut, you just teach a few kids here and there, and then you just have a great time. But actually, he told me afterwards it was the same, but I had this vision of this wilderness and this amazing thing, but instead it was like a refugee camp, really. It was like there was like 600 students, and there was like 250 counsellors, and they were all English, most of them. I'd never been abroad. I'd been to Paris on a trip with some friends on a boat, and then this is the first time I'd been on a plane, and I suddenly went into Connecticut. I was in the summer camp, and then I looked on the map where all the other kids lived, and some of them lived in California, and I just drove over. You could do these driveways, so I drove to California, drove around, Trailways bus, and it was quite a revelation for me, really. I met other people who were then traveling on to Australia. I just suddenly realized the world was a lot bigger than it. Just suddenly grew exponentially for me. I could see this world as this massive place, and it totally transformed me.
Our conversation then turned to Mike's studies at university for a master's degree when he finally came to grips with a dyslexia diagnosis.
10 years ago, Sarah said to me, my partner, she said, you should do a master's. And because I had that craving to do it, to be in that sort of world, lots of my friends were professors or lecturers. And I sort of thought, yeah, and I was actually teaching at Camberwell as well. And I thought, well, it's probably a good idea that I sort of get some sort of qualification other than A levels. So they used my book actually as a way of, not as an undergraduate, to bypass that. And I thought it was going to be really easy, actually. And I think that's that Dunning-Kruger effect, where you believe the less you know, the more confident you are, and the more the less confident you get. I did tick the box that said dyslexia, and they said, well, it's going to take about 6 weeks to process, and you have to be assessed. And I thought, oh, fine. But then I went into this class, and I just thought, it was just reading these academic papers. The course was an MRes, and it was information environments, and it was the greatest course ever, I have to say. It was amazing, but it was a total, totally blew. Well, it just, I opted to drop out almost immediately because I just couldn't read the papers. I just couldn't understand the language. I did the dyslexic assessment, and it was one of these classes that I just didn't understand. And I talked to the assessor, and she just gave me this thing. She said, you just got to ask questions. You go, if you don't know, you just ask. Everyone else was writing stuff down, and I said, I didn't understand that. Could you explain it? And he sort of started to explain something else. And I said, I don't understand that either. And then he was like, almost a bit like, oh, come on, And then there's like, who else? Come on, someone tell him. And it's like, and it just turned out the whole class, no one understood it, but were too scared to ask. And I was thinking, it just revealed where that point is, where people don't ask questions because they just don't want to appear stupid. I mean, I guess that's the only thing I'd say, which I find quite good about now it's like I can say I'm neurodivergent. I don't understand that, so I have an excuse to say that instead of feeling stupid or feeling like I should know. It's like, now I know I don't have to know, I can ask. But I think that lesson applies to everybody, though. It's like, you should be able to ask questions, really. It's like, if you don't get it, you shouldn't pretend. But we are in a society where everybody pretends to know everything, and you're judged on this. Again, Dunning-Kruger effect is like the thing I think sort of reveals it all, really. It's like the people that are most confident generally know the least, I think.
Neurodivergence manifests in lots of different ways depending on the individual. The discussion moved on to talking about specifics of what it means to have a fast brain, comparing it to driving a car at top speed, but in reverse.
So in a way, that's really how you can apply that to neurodivergency, where you need people with an alternative points of view, and because, I'm thinking slightly different to you. It's like I'm coming up with different results. They're not always good, and often they're bad, but sometimes they'll be really good, they'll be totally like, how did you miss that, sort of thing. So, and I think there's the other thing is how my brain works. It runs really fast. Like, even now I'm thinking further down here we're going to talk about, but it's sort of like, and I want to spit those things out, and then I get bored quickly and I move on. But I always think about is how fast my brain moves fast. I know that, like, visually. When I got tested for my dyslexia, like, I had a super high IQ. I could, but it's like I couldn't even read my own report. I didn't understand the report. But basically, I'm visually, I'm off the spectrum, and it's like I can do. I remember always impressing my daughter when she was at nursery, primary school, when she was about 5 or 6. I could do Where's Wally in like literally 5 seconds. Literally, you could pull a page, and I did them for about 6 or 7 pages in a row. Most of it was luck, I have to say, but I don't look at a page. I scan, and I can pull out quotes out of books really well, but not read the book. It's sort of like I see shapes and patterns, and I can totally just pull them apart and find things. All my friends now, if I look back in terms of the past, there's neurodivergency around. They're quirky, they're off, they're oddball in a way. And I'm always wondering, in the past, I think now I know why I hang out with them, because we're on the same wavelength. And it's like, even Stuart Croggs, he's talking about some stuff, and now because I think in a way people start to readdress stuff. Like, he's always losing things, and I always thought, I couldn't understand why he couldn't get things organized when he had all the skills and I didn't, as it were. Do you know what I mean? He had the knowledge, he had the education, but why wasn't it working for him? But I knew how things worked, because I was sort of always doing things just by default, or through my path of because I think that's the thing. You have this system and you make it work, and if you don't know the system, you can't make it. I feel like I'm driving up the road, I'm the motorway. I'm going to say 80 because everyone drives at 80 when I do go on a motorway. But basically, I'm actually driving a Ferrari, but I'm driving it in reverse. And that's a very complicated thing, to appear normal, but totally wrong in every aspect. And people are going, well, why? You have a Ferrari, you can go 120 miles an hour, can't you? But not in reverse. It's hard enough just keeping up with everybody else. So it is a hare and the tortoise in a way, isn't it? Like, you just speed ahead and then you fall. It's not falling asleep. It's more just falling spiraling out into a direction that just doesn't work. I often obsess on things and nothing comes of it. I've got lots of projects that I need to start or do, and then and everything's moving forward slowly. But COVID's been hard. Things have been pushed back or done. So I feel quite frustrated, because I've done quite a lot of work over the past 4 years and none of it's seen light of day. So it has effect on me, really.
In talking about neurodiversity, ideas of how society needs grit came to the fore, and how technology has changed our need for different ways of engaging?
For me, they're all joined together, because I think the thing about computers, pre-computers, the idea to draw something straight and perfect was really difficult. You'd have to manually do these things. You'd never get a straight line. But now the default is a straight line. So people would purposely bring in glitch or things just to make it interesting. And I think that sort of relates to society. Society, when it's perfect, is actually quite boring. And it's like if the world is perfect, you end up with places like Singapore almost, or you've almost got that happening in China, where somewhere like Shanghai, it's like where it's just clean, super clean on the surface, that is, and then everything's pushed out. It's happening to London now as well. It's where you have this sort of cleanliness to it where everyone thinks it's great, and if you look at it, it's quite hollow and it's quite lacking any grit.
Our conversation moved on to talking about climate change. I went on to ask Mike about his thoughts on Greta Thunberg, the climate change activist.
I think it's also because I was watching those documentaries and the film, and my takeaway from it is, I think it's like I could see, push climate change aside, I could see her frustrations and her vision is, okay, the subject's climate change, but it's like her frustration on how other people just don't get it. It's like, and I think this is because there's lots of it's down to our conditioning, and really it's about seeing things differently. And it's like, we have the information, and that's really all she's saying. Look, the information's there, read it, understand it, and we have to do something about it really quickly. I mean, luckily she had a sort of parents who are pretty connected and stuff, so how many other Gretas are out there that didn't get or didn't get the exposure, so I mean, people always sort of slate them off, going, oh yeah, it's all right for you if you got that, but actually thank God she's got some savvy parents.
Mike went on to talk about his thoughts on the economy, climate change and consumerism.
I mean, I think that ties into the whole climate change thing, is because we're told GDP is our measurement of growth and the healthy economy, when that actually is the most destructive. Like if you have an oil rig spill and you clean it up, your GDP goes up. But if you actually give people a pay rise, your GDP goes down. It's like just by spending money pushes the GDP up. But if you actually spend it on proper things, it goes down. That's not really factoring in the planet and its resources.
A few other writers have been key to Mike's work about climate change. George Marshall is one of many thinkers who have influenced him. Key is the difficulty in fully grasping some of the concepts that underlie what's happening and really understanding the impact of consumerism.
George Marshall, he's done a book called Don't Even Think About It, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change. And basically he talks about this thing where we don't really, we don't like the idea that we're the bad people. Nobody intentionally causes climate change, but our whole system is geared to this destruction. And it's basically people feel that they're doing these things, like they're going on holiday for, because they've been working hard or something. They don't or driving the kids to school. They don't really sort of realize these actions are actually causing it. And there's no one there to tell us they're causing it, even though there is the news and everything to tell us. There's no government infrastructure. And this is really because we're geared towards consumption. Our economic growth is about basically infinite growth on a finite planet, and that we're realizing is we're reaching that the end of the road very quickly. It's like we're in a pandemic. It's like the whole idea that this is even slightly normal is just totally surreal. And the idea that we might have there's a strong possibility for having another pandemic in the next 10 years is extremely likely. And it's like, it's just, we're not out of this one yet, and we're never really going to be out of it. It's just going to drift along and sort of graduate away. But or it may come back with vengeance. We just don't know. But it's like the idea that we have to pretend everything's normal and carry on instead of saying, what the fuck, the system has to change. I mean, the least that's happening in America, there isn't a reverse of direction. We're just carrying on with this carbon neutral bollocks, really. It's just it's this sort of leaving everything till later, because, and I thought about this. I think partly because people think it's 100 years away, everyone, because the measurements are made in 100 years, they think 100 years is when is the problem. But actually, we might reach 1.5 degrees in the next 10 years. And it's like, that means it's the end of the coral reefs. That means they're gone. It's like, so somewhere like Australia should be promoting the barrier reef as come now before closing down sale. That's what they should be saying. It's like, come to the reef now before it's all gone. But they don't want to, no, part of it. I mean, even I don't believe it sometimes. I just forget, it's sort of like, because the subplot, if this was a film, it's like the classic film, isn't it? Everyone's carrying on as normal when the world's falling apart. And yeah, can people cope with it in a way? And I think this 1.5, 2 degrees thing is really hard to comprehend. I still don't really get that 4 degrees minus is actually an ice age. I don't, it doesn't really, I can't really, because 1 degree, it's not much when you go outside, but it's like, because it's average global and, and it's sort of, I still don't really grasp that one, to be honest. And I don't think many other people do either. Otherwise, if we said it was 50 degrees or something, people would then get a bit scary or something. But everything was 1.5 degrees. If we pass that, it's the end of the world. And now it's 2 degrees now. And now we're going to possibly entertain 3. And they're already, we know it's 1 point, I think it's a 5% chance of halting at 1.5 degrees. And if we stop everything, like just cease to function, like just like lockdown or something, it would bring our odds up to 26%. So we've got a 74% chance of reaching 1.5 degrees very, very soon. So our odds, it's pretty, I'm sure it's like governments, you'd think the thing is, it's the powers. I mean, how do we get Brexit? How do we get all these things? How do we get Trump? It's like, it's quirky controls. Getting back to the consumption thing, I think it's like, it's even, so everyone sees climate change as the problem. And, people talking about buying electric cars, and buying our way, out of this, to fix it, really, it's like we should be looking at consumption as the problem, and climate change as the outcome, because like, for example, if you said that all the oceans could be a perfect carbon sink and could soak up all the carbon, would we still carry on with deforestation? Would we still carry on, destroying the planet? We would, because there would be nothing to stop us. But even now, something's there to stop us, but we're not actually doing anything about it. We're sort of pretending, we're sort of twiddling around saying, oh yeah, carbon zero, carbon neutral. I mean, I saw outside, it's a fast food restaurant, but sort of slightly posh. But basically, they've got carbon neutral hamburger. And then I looked at it a bit closer, and it's basically about offsetting. They basically assess lots of this new stuff based on future inventions to sequester carbon and stuff. And it just doesn't, it's unproven, it's not gonna, and it's also expensive, really simple, quick ways is just, as Greta says, it's a simple problem. You just stop fossil fuels. I mean, the other one as well for me is animal agriculture as well, because that's the other driver as well. But yeah, carbon neutral means that while some emissions are still being generated by a building process, these emissions are offset somewhere else, making the overall net emission zero. whilst carbon zero means that no carbon emissions are being produced from a product service, e.g. carbon zero electricity could be provided by a 100% renewable energy supplier. It's wrong to sort of tell people these things because they believe it. We're going to build loads of roads, we're going to build a third runway, and we're going to be carbon neutral. And the only reason we are carbon neutral is because we ship everything overseas. Like the plane that takes off doesn't count because it's not, is it the country that lands from, it takes off from? Is it the country it lands? Is it the people in the plane's responsibility? Is it the pilot? Is it the airline? Is it, they just basically push that aside and so it doesn't count. It doesn't count to the country. So you can easily fiddle the figures and you're still going to be in the same position.
Next, I asked Mike about what role art can play in getting the message across about climate change and the possibility of changing how society functions.
The trouble with art for me is I'm still learning what art is, and I'm still very judgmental on lots of art because I see lots of art and just think it's crap, and other art I'm sort of revisit and see. I mean, and that was, working with people who are artists, they sort of helped me through that process. But I think, art is a brilliant vehicle to sort of get messaging across. I mean, I thought before it was a case of just highlighting information. You just tell people about these things, and then they respond to it. But I realise now with the whole fake news thing and confirmation bias that people just decide to change the narrative to suit themselves. But I think the overarching narrative is that people realise that people think it's bad, but it's going to be all right. It's sort of, we're going to get there in the end, and there is a lot of people, that thing doing, people, I don't know, that thing that always gets me is doing the right thing. It's like, I'm not 100% sure what the right thing is. Climate scientists don't 100% know. It's like, why would you assume what that is? It's like, because you're believing in the system again. And I think it's like, for me, the system, I don't believe in the system. I believe the system's corrupt. It's like everything is like going back to the consumption thing, is like, now we're talking about climate justice, but again, this is re-evaluating our existence on the planet. It's like the Spanish, the British, we didn't help countries. We didn't liberate them. We destroyed them and we stole from them, and that's coming to light now. And it's like it's a pretty sort of horrible thing to find out, isn't it? It's almost like finding out your grandfather was a Nazi or something. It's like it just doesn't rest very well in terms of your belief, because Adam Curtis talks about this a lot in Bitter Lake, actually, about this idea of good and evil, where there isn't good and bad people. There's no evil. You're never fighting evil. You're actually just fighting for your country. And that's actually something else that he's the guy who's written Sapiens. He basically refers to the fact that there's only 120 people you can sort of relate to. Once you go beyond 120 people, you're not going to fight for them and do anything. But the way you get past that is you, and in the history we've done this in the past, is you have religion, and then you have land, countries. So people will fight for their country, but they won't fight for the 130th person they don't know. And also the other one is corporations. It says by having corporations, we sort of believe in this non-existent thing. Like we believe, and I think it takes the Peugeot as an example. It says if you destroy all the cars, you still believe in the brand. It's something that doesn't really exist, but you unite people, together. But basically this idea of good and evil, so how we can unite the world on stuff is going, well, things do change. I mean, that's the optimism side of it, is really, I did this climate lab in Liverpool with an organization called Metal, and it was really enlightening. It was great, actually. But it was a little bit somber, we felt that there was no answers, but that was almost about, I don't know, a month before Extinction Rebellion. And for me, that was true transformation. It's like how you could totally change people's perceptions. And even the people who are cynical about it were very much, a few weeks in were like actually saying this is quite amazing, really. And there is those shots of growth of optimism around, I think. And I think there's another guy, a book I've just read or listened to on Audible is Rutger Bregman, and his book's called Humankind, and it's changing the perception of how mankind, because we're always told that underneath we're all evil, but on the top we pretend to be good. And given different circumstances, say like Lord of the Flies, we all turn evil. But he found he's rewritten history by examining it and seeing that actually when that does happen, people actually turn out to be quite nice. It's like, and it is dominated by old privileged white males dictating these stories, and so, but he's often saying that basically basically his whole thing is that we're all nice people, and we're all nice people deep down, but it's like we get distorted with control and consumption of money. It's like, just this idea of billionaires, isn't it? It's just like you look at that, the idea that Bill Gates can get people to give up like 98% of their wealth and they still can live beyond their means. It's like, if you cannot spend 2% of your earnings, and it doesn't matter what you buy, a boat, plane, whatever, it's like, what is the point of having that money? It's like, it just doesn't exist. It's that money comes from somebody else. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you don't really, it's not equal in any way. And it's that whole idea of earning lots of money and doing this, building up this. I'd be interested to know what drives them in a way to do that. It's like, wouldn't you just say, once you got like, if you're an Amazon guy, you go, well, okay, what, why don't we just put this into shares and just share it between the employees? What have you got to gain, really? You've got nothing, have you? It's not like you can spend it. It's just control and believing you're superior.
And finally, Mike led us into how his ADHD affects his process when producing digital art, like the 9 Earths project.
I need security. I need to, okay, so, and the worst thing I need is somebody to say, oh, I must do that thing. I'll do that soon. I need someone to say, I'll do that by Tuesday, it's done, or not do it, because otherwise I'll do it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I have to know things are done, otherwise I start thinking about them, and then it's the noise. It's the noise in my head is like constantly nagging. And I have these lists, and I've got hundreds of lists, and got things to do. Everybody has things to do, domestic things and stuff like that, but I have to clear my head of stuff. So at the moment I'm working on 9 Earths, and it's great. And I really, and in a way, it's like I got this booked in, and now this is finished, I can move back into 9 Earths, and I'm really, I'm full of excitement to do it. But I know the second I start, it might just slow down and sort of get lost in because I want instant gratification as well. And I think, some of the process for the design process of the screen is really time consuming. It takes like days to do. And then you look at it and go, okay, well, that's not going to work. And then you sort of move, but I can visualize pretty good, but it's like visualizing beyond other like the stars. It's almost like visualizing the stars, but what they're on the other side of the planet, and what you can see. And I know roughly what they look like, but I need to actually see it to double check. It's like, and that sort of, most people can't even see the stars, but I want to dial into some of those details, and it frustrates me immensely.
This brings us to the end of this month's podcast. Please note, this recording with Mike Faulkner was made before the critical IPCC report was published, and we now could hit 1.5 degrees within the next 4 years, as reported on the BBC News as Code Red. I'd like to thank Mike for his time. Go to diffuse.com to find out more about Mike's latest project, 9 Earths, a film, an installation and series of talks which has been commissioned for COP 26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference due in November 2021. 9 Earths explores the relationship between everyday events and humanity's self-destructive and excessive demand for environmental resources. This is Colin Hambrook saying farewell till next time.
Visit greyeye.org and disabilityarts.online for details of productions, events, interviews, opinions, reviews, and learning opportunities.